You got your story in your head. You're all ready to go. It's jumping to come onto the page. Then you go and you sit down and nothing happens. How do we fix that problem? We'll talk about that on the other side of the intro. Hi, I'm John Gilstrap, author of the Jonathan Grave thriller series, and beginning in March of 2021, the Victoria Emerson Crimson Phoenix series, which will begin at that time. I cruise a lot of these writers' boards and such on Facebook, and one of the recurring questions that always comes up is, how do I go about starting the book? How do I get the words to start flowing? How do I end this kind of creative constipation thing that happens whenever I sit down? Is it writer's block? I don't know. Personally, I'm not sure that writer's block is really a thing, but I know that there are certainly days when you sit down and the words don't want to come. They come slowly. It feels like you just kind of don't know what it is that you want to say. You know what it is you want to say, but you don't know how you want to say it. This is particularly prevalent with me at the beginning of a book. Right after you type chapter 1, and then suddenly, every word is a choice from among infinite variables. And it's very difficult to know how to get it going. So here's my solution to you. Just sit down and write. Understand the fact that the words you put down are going to suck because you don't know where you're going yet. Understand that what you do put on paper is probably not going to survive a future draft, and if it does survive a future draft, it's going to live on at a place that is much later, or is certainly going to be elsewhere within the book. And at this stage, it just doesn't matter. At this stage, you're just trying to get words on the page. For me, the writing process itself is where I discover the story. It's certainly where I discover the characters. So I've been doing this for a long time, and the lesson I've learned is there's no right way to do it. The only way to get yourself going is to get yourself going. Might an outline help? I don't know. I used to be an obsessive outliner. Because somebody told me that I needed to do that. And what I found is that over time, I stopped outlining because the book, after I was done with the outline, I would sit down and start writing the book. The book itself bore very little resemblance to the outline where I started. And here's the problem I have with outlines. Me personally, this is you do what you need to do. To me, outlining was a process that was so plot oriented. It's like pushing checkers around on a board. This happens and this happens and this happens, and there's no emotional involvement for me in any of the characters. And as I said before, that for me, I am a very character driven writer, and I just don't. I need to be in the character's headspace in order to figure out what motivates them to do things. Now, having said that, I do always know basically where I want to go, right? I know the point of the book. I know some of the set pieces. I write thrillers, right? So I know what some of the set pieces are in the middle. But I don't know the specifics of it all. I look at it this way. What my outline looks like is, imagine you're planning a trip from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. I know that I'm going to have to go through the Midwest to make that trip. But it's not till I start driving, in this case writing, it's not till I start driving that I decide whether or not I'm going to pass through Indianapolis or Chicago or Nashville on my way out to LA. So for me, the writing process, I need to have a basic direction, but I don't need to know specifically how to get there. Now, I know authors who obsessively outline so that they know before they write, type the words chapter 1, they know exactly what the contents of chapter 32 are going to be. So, in their case, I know one writer, if he gets bored writing chapter 3, he just moves on to something in chapter 5 or chapter 24 because he knows precisely what's going to happen. My head just doesn't work that way. Now, when it comes down to the topic of this book, or excuse me, of this video, about how do you keep the words flowing, it's easy to get distracted by ideas for what you want to write downrange. For me, for example, if I'm in the middle of a story and I get this great idea for something that can happen later in the book, well, if you do outline, you can go to the outline and you throw that bit in and then come back to your original document. What I do is I just drop to the bottom of the document I'm writing now, make a note to myself, and then go back to the story that I'm writing. To the degree that when I'm done with a manuscript, after 380, 400, 420 pages, whatever it is, the last 30 or 40 pages after I write the end are actually notes that have to be deleted from the manuscript. You need to get, if outlining helps you, if it helps keep the ideas flowing so that when you sit down at the end of one writing session, you know where it is you want to go for the next one, that's great. Use it. There is no right and wrong way. If an outline works for you, absolutely use it. If it doesn't work for you, don't sweat it. Just find the process that works for you. But the critical element is to write every day, or as many days as you can. Yeah, I begin each writing session with a rewrite of the previous session. Back years ago, I got some advice from a fellow writer that the best way to keep the momentum going from day to day when you're writing is to end a writing session in the middle of a scene, so that when you go back the next day, you pick up and get the momentum by finishing the scene. I can't do that. I couldn't sleep. I can't leave bullets in the air, right? So it's just my process that I have to finish a scene in order to get it out of my head so that I can concentrate on other things. But there is a problem with that you can, having brought stability to the story at the previous session or the current session, I come up the next day and say, oh, well, heck, now where do I want to go? Here's my solution. Start every writing session by rewriting what you wrote in the previous session. So that gives you the momentum. I fix the grammar, I fix the dialogue, I make sure the characters do what they would be motivated to do. I make sure that the dialogue sounds like real people. I change which to that where necessary, as if I really understand how any of that works. And then, that can depends on how productive I was and how good I was in the previous session. That rewrite can take, an hour, maybe 2 hours at the beginning of today's writing session, but now I'm back in the story and I have the momentum going to move forward in today's writing. So it's a little cheat, whatever works for you. The idea is to get the creativity flowing, and that's my way of doing it. One last point. Back when I was in the Fire and Rescue Service, we had an expression that we used a lot, and that was embrace the suck. There are elements of doing any job that just plain out suck, and that's true of writing as well. The muddled middle, as I call it, it's tedious. You got all that connective tissue of the story that doesn't seem to want to come together. I've been doing this, as I said, a long, long time, 22 books, I think, and there's never been a time that I don't get around page 200 and I wonder, what was I thinking? How can I be writing such dreck? None of this makes sense. None of the characters are doing what they're supposed to do. And it's because the writing process itself in the middle is very difficult. That's the moment when normally I start fantasizing about the next book, because the next book seems so fresh and so easy to do. You've got the premise and a climax. And what too many writers do, particularly young writers or rookie writers, they take that opportunity to stop this story and go write another story. That's always a mistake. Stick it through, keep your head down, and finish what you're doing. Another thing to avoid Remember back in the old days when you were growing up, the lure of a really tasty dessert made you suffer through the Brussels sprouts because you're not going to get the good stuff unless you eat the bad stuff? Well, writing is a lot like that too. There's a big temptation to jump from the hard writing in the middle to go write the cool stuff at the end, the climax, which is always the fun part of a book to write. And then when you're done, well, you tell yourself you'll go back and fix the other. It's always a mistake. First of all, be professional. Stick with your craft and finish what you're going to do, and then reward yourself with writing the climax and then writing the end. Otherwise, what you do is you end up getting to the end of the story, you write all the good stuff, and at the time you should be celebrating because you finished, you got to go back and you got to fix the stuff that you didn't want to write to begin with. So this video has gone a little bit long, folks, and I apologize. I hope it clarifies some points for you. If you like the video, please subscribe to my channel. There'll be a little circle over my shoulder to do that. Like me on Facebook, John Gilstrap Author. Follow me on Twitter, @John Gilstrap. Visit my website, johngilstrap.com, and learn more about writing and some about the books and about the industry. I have a number of essays there. But if you don't do any of that stuff, please take care. Please keep reading. I'm John Gilstrap.